Hello, how are you doing today? The year 2017 is almost reaching the end, and we are heading in a new year, 2017. And I wonder that how far the Linux community has come in all these years. And I think that if you look around, I actually go to a lot of open source events and I track those industries. And if you look around, Linux has succeeded almost everywhere. Servers, supercomputers are kind of exclusive to Linux. If you just read a story written by my friend SJVN, or Steven, as he's known as, and you can see that Linux is in IoT devices, Linux is in NASA, it's in Mars, it's in Tesla cars. I mean, you no matter what, where you look at, it's everywhere. And when I said almost because there is still one area where Linux is weak, and that was an area which was kind of primary goal of Linus Torvalds when he created Linux kernel. And you guessed it right, the area is desktop Linux. Desktop is still kind of a platform where Linux has failed. Now, first of all, we need to find why it failed on the platform, and there are certain things that we can look at. But how about, instead of looking at why it failed and keep talking about it, or instead of trying to create a pseudo success story that hey, Linux has gone from 1% to 3%, and there are some YouTubers who they're like they say, oh, by 20 years Linux will dominate the market because of that curve. That's not going to work. I think what is going to work is that we look at the problem seriously, try to identify the areas where Linux need to work on desktop so that it can become a competitor to macOS and Windows and not as an alternative. I'm actually disturbed and worried about desktop Linux. The reason is that I have moved to macOS and Windows on two of my system. I have not touched the Windows system since 2005, but recently I had to move because I do a lot of video editing. Most of the videos that I shoot are in 4K, and they are for my work, where it's a very complicated workload where I use a lot of LUTs, I use a lot of effects. I worked with Lightroom, with pictures, with visuals, with animations, with audio editing, and the Adobe's suite, whether it's Adobe Premiere, After Effects, Lightroom, Photoshop, and Audition. I need the combination of all of these to work on my to produce the videos that I'm creating. And no offenses, but desktop Linux does not have any application that can handle this workload. For example, right now I am capturing this video from a GH5 through the T3 application on a macOS because there is no application for Linux. So I am using the USB Type-C cable to tether it to my Mac, so I can not only record the video but also save it, and then after that I can edit it. In addition to that, I know LibreOffice is great, I use it a lot, but there are a lot of cases. I'm working on a novel which is going to be more than 100,000 words, and as you have seen an article by my good friend Jack Wallen that LibreOffice is not capable of handling big workloads. So and I also face some problems, so I moved to but I use Microsoft Office also. Then for my mail, calendar is critical because I set up a lot of appointments and meetings, and I travel a lot. So as you know, I was in Australia, then Denmark, then Prague, and then I went to Austin. Before that I was in LA. So I deal with different time zones. So when I go to these events, I set up like at least 10 or 20 interviews there. And time zone is critical because when you set at 10 a.m., the 10 a.m. is Australian 10 a.m. or Sydney 10 a.m., not the 10 a.m. in Arlington, DC. By the way, that system is running KDE Neon. So anyway, and I do need a reliable, calendar app which can work with my email app so that the contacts and everything is well synced. So I use Outlook or Mail because Thunderbird, no offenses, is not there. Kmail is not there. Evolution is not there. So I do rely on these applications. Beyond that, even on my Mac or Windows, I use all open source applications, whether it's Chrome, which is based on Chromium open source browser, whether it's Firefox or VLC or Handbrake, and a lot of 3D printing software that are either open source like Slicer, or they are available for Linux platform as well. But in general, the way I look at it is like 6 months ago, my entire workload was on Linux desktop. Now 90% of my workload has moved to Mac OS or Windows, and the reason is not that I don't care about Linux desktop. The reason is that the Linux desktop is not offering me the platform that I need to run the application that I needed for my work. So I think that Linux desktop community need to fix this, and as usual, as people say, that easy to complain, but do you have any solutions? So I do think that there are some answers, there are some solutions, and that is based on my own experience with desktop Linux for the last 12 or more years. I started using desktop Linux in 2005, so it's been more than 12 years since I had been a desktop Linux user. I keep saying the word desktop Linux because Linux is successful everywhere. Desktop Linux is the one chunk of the big giant Linux ecosystem, so we need to be very clear what we are saying when we say Linux, because you confuse everybody when you use the term Linux for everything, because Linux is successful everywhere, so you cannot use the term Linux for desktop Linux. That's a totally different use cases. And the thing that I think Linux community should do, desktop Linux community should do, is that they identify the problem and then they try to solve it. So the way I think Linux desktop can fix this problem is, number one, there should be a desktop Linux foundation. Now that doesn't mean the Linux Foundation is a totally different organization. They're a trade organization. Their goal is to bring all the companies who use open source together so that they can work together and help each other instead of fragmenting the market and reinventing the wheel. So their goal is to kind of promote open source everywhere, and they have been massively successful. I mean, Linux Foundation is the most successful organization around the globe, And the best thing they have done is a very good balance between commercial versus community, because without commercialization, you will not succeed. Human civilization will go back to, gatherer and hunters phase, or, caveman age, if there is no economy. We need to make money to survive, to have a roof, or to do a lot of things. So yeah, economy is a very important part. Without economy, you will not survive. If you look at Europe or US or any other country, even if you look at ancient, India or China, trade was the soul. It was the lifeline. So please stop thinking of open source is something against or opposite of commercialization. No, open source is just a development model. What we're talking about is free software, which has a totally different philosophy. We are not getting into that right now. So what I think is Linux community should do, desktop Linux community should do, is create a foundation, desktop Linux foundation, whose primary goal is to work together towards one common goal. You bring all the major desktop Linux players, you bring together all the major desktop environments together, you bring all the projects which cater to the desktop Linux market, bring together under one umbrella, not to dictate, but to collaborate, so that their goal is that instead of regurgitating or reinventing the wheel, or redoing or replicating everybody else's work, collaborate on one code base, or share code base, while maintaining your own differentiation. And to be honest with you, most of the differentiation is childish. The primary goal of an operating system or a platform is to enable people to run applications. You don't use an operating system, you don't use a desktop or environment. What I use is the application. I use a browser, I use a movie player, I use whatever program it is, that's what I use. I don't use the operating system and desktop environment. The desktop environment should totally disappear. All I should be using is my application. So they should work together to offer better interoperability between the applications written by different communities. Like for example, there are a lot of problems between applications that were written by GNOME or KDE community, and if you try to run them on either of the two platforms, they don't run or they're not integrated very well. So while you can maintain different desktop environments, but try to achieve a compatibility so that people can use the same applications no matter which platform they're using. Second is that create a unified app delivery and development mechanism. That is the biggest problem desktop Linux has today. There are so many, RPM. I don't give a damn about deb or RPM, whatever, people argue about. That's pointless. The point is that you deliver an app to a user and user install that app without any problem. Second is that the moment a developer launches or releases a version of an app, it should be available for a user to install it. On Mac, whenever LibreOffice is released, I can immediately install it. I don't have to wait for 3 months for it to be in the repository and then I should be able to install it. No, I do it immediately. So settle down with either Flatpak or Snaps or whatever you guys choose. Please sit together, work together, and choose a common application delivery and development platform, which will enable for the next goal of the foundation. And the goal is to work with software vendors, commercial software vendors, to bring their applications to the unified desktop Linux platform. There is no fragmentation of, oh, you have to write app for Fedora or OpenSUSE or Ubuntu and then Pop OS and then Elementary OS and whatnot. Why? It should all be just one big giant Linux desktop Linux platform, just like Mac OS. So there is no duplication of work, that every distribution has their own maintainer for the same app. So you're wasting so many resources when you don't have that many resources either way. So settle down on that. That will encourage even companies like Adobe to just target desktop Linux as one platform, not a fragmented 20 different distributions. And that will also kind of sorry, I lost track. And the next goal should be to work with hardware vendors, GPUs. Or as I said, this Panasonic application is not even available on Linux platform, so I cannot use it. When you look at, if you look at the previous step, which is to present desktop Linux as one platform, when you have one platform to target, it will be easier even for hardware vendors to support that one platform. So the goal of the foundation should be to work with all these major hardware vendors to offer support for desktop Linux, period. No Ubuntu, no Fedora, no OpenSUSE, none such nonsense, just one platform, period. What will happen is that, then you'll get better hardware support across the board. So now you have unified app delivery, now you have support for commercial applications, now you have support for hardware. So the platform is now on technical grounds on par with Windows and Mac OS. The only thing that remains is marketing and all those stuff. That's where, once again, the community can come together and like look at a lot of other open source projects. They don't come pre-installed. People install them on their systems. And one thing that the foundation must do is teach these desktop Linux communities and projects to learn to compromise and collaborate. It's so easy that people fork a project for a tiny thing. So they go ahead and they walk away with a project, they fork it and walk away with 10 users and they're happy because, okay, they have 10 users, they're happy, but they have fragmented the whole market. No offenses to Pop OS or Elementary OS, but what's the point of doing that? You may have 10,000 users that you need for your own sustainability. Elementary OS may have, Pop OS may have, whatever XOS has, they all have 10,000 users, which is good for their own companies or for their own unsustainability, but they have fragmented the whole market. So everybody has 10,000, so there are 10,000 distributions, each having 10,000 users, instead of having one big giant Linux, desktop Linux ecosystem where it's one platform. The reason is that a lot of people in the desktop Linux community failed to compromise. That's the reason Unity happened with GNOME Phone, because they could not reach a compromise. They could not collaborate. So this foundation should also work on a couple of C's. One is communication, communicate with each other. Second is be competitive with compete with each other, but on technical grounds, not religious warfare in the forum that KDE sucks or GNOME sucks. No. Third is collaborate, work with each other instead of forking projects, and that needs compromise. Just reach a compromise point. OpenSUSE and KDE community, they show how you can reach all these points. The KDE, they had they moved really fast, and OpenSUSE wanted a very stable release of KDE for the Leap version. So they worked together, they adjusted, they made some compromises, and there is an LTS version of Plasma for OpenSUSE. So there is a compromise. So excuse me. So these are some areas that the foundation can focus on. And once you achieve all of that, then now you have, before we conclude this, that does not mean that you cannot have different distribution. I'm not saying that there should be only one Fedora or OpenSUSE. No, there can be as many distributions as you want, but they should all be interoperable. You should differentiate on what you pre-package for your users. If you are Pop! OS, okay, pre-package applications, or just use a UI for your users. If you're Elementary OS, do whatever you want to do. Same with Fedora. No. But that does not mean that these operating systems or distribution not compatible with each other. Look at the commercial world, OpenStack or Docker containers, whatever. It doesn't really matter where you run them. They all run same, whether it's OpenStack from Red Hat or from SUSE or from Canonical or from Mirantis, from Rackspace. It does not matter. It's all compatible with each other. So achieve that compatibility. So you can still have your niche distribution, but you are not digging your own cave and living in your own cave. You're still working with the larger community. And you can have distributions which are specific for security, like Tails OS or Kali Linux. Yeah, you can, but that does not mean that they should be disconnected from the rest of the world. So I just wanted to make clear that I'm not proposing that there should be one distribution. There can be as much diversity as long as it's all compatible. So what will happen is, in the end, is that you will have one big foundation with common goal, and that is to promote desktop Linux everywhere through very practical solutions. One is unified app delivery mechanism. Second is working with actual software vendors like Adobe or whoever is there on that, working with hardware vendors, and then working with the community itself. A lot of people may not like it. I mean, the people who prefer so-called freedom, whatever it is, I don't even know what it means anymore. But if you don't like proprietary application or whatever it is, that's your problem. A platform means that you should be able to install any application you want on that platform. The goal of an operating system or a platform is to enable a user to run whatever applications you want to run. If you cannot, then that platform has failed. If you don't want to run Adobe, don't use it. It is fine. You don't want to use Uber, don't use it. That does not mean that Uber should not run their cars on the street where you live in. So just because you don't want to use Adobe or whatever, for whatever reason, don't use it. But do not stop the platform from supporting those things. And in some cases, it's right not to use those applications, but in many cases, people need them. So these are a few points that I think that desktop Linux community should think about. And if they do it right, 2018 can be the year of desktop Linux. Just look at this point and think about it, that if you really do that, what is stopping you from not bringing the year of desktop Linux? Just think about it and share your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel. See you next time.